All right, guys, welcome back to the channel. This is Shane with Shane Media. Today we're going to discuss the original Terrifier from 2016. Let's get into it. Terrifier is a 2016 film starring David Howard Thornton, Jenna Carnell, Samantha Scafidi, and directed by Damien Leone. Woo! What a movie, guys. Never in my life have I witnessed such a mediocre movie reach the heights of praise that this movie and its sequel have reached. But I digress. I'm on here to give this movie an objective and fair review, so starting with the good. Just like in the second movie, Art himself, I think in a much better movie, it would definitely be worth giving this guy some praises. I like his campiness combined with his brutality, and the fact that he is a silent killer makes him even more fascinating to see on screen. But unfortunately, much like the sequel, that is where my good things category ends. Yep, we are already moving into the negatives. I don't even have any mixed things to say about this movie. I would have liked to come on here and really praise them for what they could accomplish with the small budget they had to work with, and to a degree I do appreciate what they pulled off, but when I go into a movie that I know has a small budget, I'm looking for things. I'm paying attention to how the filmmaker utilized that small budget, because there's techniques out there and tricks that a filmmaker can use to his disposal to make the film feel larger in scale than it actually is. 3/4 of this movie takes place in one location, for instance, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. In fact, it's smart because it's a cheaper way to film your movie, and if a filmmaker knows how to use that to his advantage, he can give the film an isolated and almost claustrophobic feeling to it that adds to the tension. I've seen several movies pull this off beautifully. This movie just felt like it had nothing else to offer, though, and basically was taking what amounted to about 30 minutes worth of a movie and stretched it out to over 90. It just seemed like it was just setting you up for the next money shot. That's it. That style of filmmaking may work for some people, but it doesn't for me. I need substance. I hated the characters. The blonde was annoying and straight up being mean to Art before she even knew he was a psycho. So, yeah, I mean, you don't really feel bad for him, but you don't really feel bad for her either. So you're almost waiting for her to get a knife to the face. And the brunette just kept making dumb decisions. I counted like 5 or 6 times where she could have probably pretty easily gotten out of this situation had she just not been dumb. A good filmmaker will write smart people that overcome a smarter villain. People shouldn't be dying because they're dumb. If you want to have 1 or 2 people in the movie at most, die to those circumstances, fine. But basically, the people in your movie should be dying because the villain is just a little smarter, not because you're dumb. And it's more gratifying that way, because then it makes your villain feel like more of a threat, because you're like, holy cow, I was convinced that person was going to get away with that, or I was convinced that person was going to live. And so it creates a bigger sense of dread, because you're like, this guy is just always one step ahead of them no matter what they do. A good example of this, I think, is the original Saw. I hated every sequel after the first one, but I loved the first Saw, and it was for this reason. Jigsaw was always just one step ahead of everybody, and not because they were dumb. In fact, most of the people in that movie were making, for all intents and purposes, pretty smart decisions. They just couldn't outsmart him, which made him a much bigger threat. But with this movie, you're like, well, duh, of course she died. She basically turned herself into the guy, and that's just annoying for me. Like, I always say, movies have matured since the 80s, and I think it's okay to expect more out of them. I know we had a lot of movies in the 80s, like the Friday the 13th and the Nightmare sequels, not the first one. The first one was great, but, several of the sequels. We had movies like The Burning and Sleepaway Camp. That's okay for that era, That's what filmmaking was, but that's not what we are anymore. We've advanced, we've progressed, and I think it's okay to expect more. I just do. Honestly, the only character I was even rooting for in this movie was the janitor. I mean, the freaking janitor, guys, and I really felt bad when he died. I guess that's a positive, if, I wanted to give this movie one more positive, but another problem I had with this movie, which kind of just goes along with everything else, is that there's a little bit at the beginning of the movie that sets up, the rest of the movie, and basically the end of the movie is kind of interesting, but at everything in the middle, there's just no rhythm to it whatsoever. I had a similar problem with Rob Zombie's first Halloween, where it feels like you could take any scene in that movie and place it anywhere else in the movie and just mix and match the scenes and nothing changes. There are no through lines, nothing is setting up anything else. It's just a bunch of kill scenes basically that you could basically watch in any order. It did have one really gnarly kill that was kind of cool to watch. Everybody knows the kill, but one scene can't salvage an entire movie, guys. Sorry. I actually liked this movie less than I liked the second one. And I only gave that movie a 5, so I'm going to give this one a 3.5. Sorry, guys, I just couldn't bring myself to be any more generous to this movie than that. But in case this review didn't run you off, go ahead and like and share this video. And if you haven't already, please subscribe, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.